here is Fabian Aellig from Students Reporter, right here in Beijing. And we are at the World Resource Forum, and I have here with me Mrs. Usher from University Leeds. And I don't know if you can present yourself in a few words.
I'm Philippa Usher from the University of Leeds. My research looks at how we can produce biodiesel from algae, and particularly looking in Brazil.
Okay, thank you. Maybe about biofuels. You said you were looking at algae, biofuels, and I wanted to ask, what's the new research there? What are the new generation? You talked about the third generation to me before, and what do they address the problems of the last generations of biofuels?
Yeah. Okay, so first generation biofuels refers to things like corn and soybeans. Second generation looks at using the biomass that surrounds the actual food crop. And then third generation is algae. This is different again because it can be grown in a completely different way, and you process it in a different way. So algae is been looked to because it can produce really high yields of oil, but it removes some of the problems, like it uses less land. You could even grow it out at sea, so it's not competing with food, which is one of the major issues with biofuels.
Okay, you talk about algae and that we can make a lot of oil out of it. I also read that the oil made out of it is not really efficient for the energy. I mean, if you compare the energy we have to put in it to extract the energy,
yeah.
Sometimes you had to put more energy than you were creating actually. Is it the same with the microalgae?
Yeah, this is like one of the key parts of the research at the moment. I should say that algae is only in a developmental stage at the moment. It's not actually at industrial scale. So we're looking at ways that you can reduce the amount of energy you have to put in to grow. So this would involve pairing it up with different industries. So for example, growing the algae in wastewater. That way you wouldn't have to produce the fertilizers that would have to feed the algae. So that's one way of reducing it. You could join up the production process with industries that produce carbon dioxide, because the algae need the carbon dioxide to grow. So this again reduces the energy. It also depends how you grow the algae. So you can either grow it in an open system, which is basically just a big pond outside, or you can grow it in tubes or big tanks which have a big light source. This obviously is going to use a lot more energy, but you produce a much higher yield of algae. So the sort of benefits and disadvantages of both ways.
In your presentation and your research, you talk about Brazil,
yeah.
which is a country which is already producing a lot of biofuels in the world, and they are also producing algae biofuels, I think.
They're not. It's not actually part of their fuel mix at the moment.
Okay.
As I said, it's all in a sort of a developmental stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because in your presentation you talked about farmers who are doing this, right?
Yeah, the farmers. Well, in Brazil,
yeah.
There's this scheme called the National Production and Use of Biodiesel Program, and this involves family farmers, and they grow the feedstock for the biodiesel. And the feedstocks they're producing are things like castor beans, babasu, small-scale crops. They then can sell this to biodiesel producers such as Petrobras, for example, and they get a good price due to incentives from the government. What I was trying to say in that is that we couldn't produce algae in the same way because they wouldn't be able to build the infrastructure for each farmer, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of farmers.
Yeah.
Would all have to build their own little piece of infrastructure. So yeah, it wouldn't be feasible to incorporate this algae system in the same way.
Okay. So you would like build big centers or big...
Yeah, so like I said, you'd have to pair it up with another industry. So if you were going to use like waste treatment plant, you'd locate your plant near the city because that's where all the sewage is going to come from, and then so the people who live in the city potentially could come and work there. Also, you're cleaning the water supply with the algae. So the water being discharged from the sewage is going to be much cleaner, and this is going to have good social impacts, because in Brazil at the moment there are quite big problems with water quality in the cities especially.
Okay, so like producing biofuels will also help the population there?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And what about the works? I mean, those farmers who are actually working now, you said it was thousands of families, would they keep their job or lose it? How is it? How many people would be involved in the production of that?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that at the moment. What I was sort of speculate is that we continue with the production, the family farmers as they are, because this is a successful program. They need more investment in like the technology that they use and the resources that they receive. But at the end of the day, there have been shown to be benefits of this program as it is. And then to use algae as a complementary technology to increase the volume of biodiesel that's being produced. At the moment, about 90% of the feedstock for biodiesel in Brazil is soya. And like going back to your initial question, that's causing massive problems with competition of land for food and degradation of the land, conflict over land ownership. So we really need to find a different source for the biodiesel that can be comparable to the scale of soya.
Is it like biofuels, will they replace fossil fuels, or are they a complement to it? Because I mean, on a long scale, we are talking about electricity, and they are talking about new waters. Will biodiesel, well, I mean, developing all this industry costs a lot of money. And will it be like useful, or is it too late already for biofuels to be developed? I mean, if you compare to electricity, for example.
It's definitely not too late to develop them, and the sooner we can start to develop them, the better. Taking Brazil as an example, Brazil already has the lowest carbon emissions per energy produced in the world because it has a massive amount of hydropower. But this doesn't mean that it should reduce the amount of alternatives it's using. I think this is important for every country, is that they should just diversify their fuel mix as much as possible, use every resource that we can find and make it as good as possible to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels.
But with those microalgae, we cannot replace totally the fossil fuels. We have to make a mix.
I think it would be unlikely that algae would ever completely replace every other energy source.
Okay.
There's just not the capacity to do it, especially not in the next, let's say, 100 years.
Maybe a last question, because you talk a lot about Brazil. And I mean, if we produce everything there, we have to export it, which costs a lot of money again and pollutes again.
Yeah.
Is it possible, like, to do your algae project with microalgae somewhere else than Brazil? And if yes, where?
Yeah, I mean, Brazil is ideally placed to develop this technology because it's got a good climate, it's got land availability, and it already has a biodiesel infrastructure. But no, we need to develop this technology and then deploy it elsewhere. In the US, they're already doing loads of research into algae, and they've got some quite good-sized plants already. If we can also develop a technology that looks at offshore production from microalgae and macroalgae, which is seaweed. But the problem is land availability when you're talking about biofuels. But yeah, we can definitely do that.
For example, in Asia, like we are in China, would it be possible to develop that, or is it the climate isn't good enough?
No, we could develop it. The thing about microalgae is there are thousands and thousands of different strains. So technically, what you could do is you could find the strain that will grow best in these conditions, you know, under this amount of light, under this amount of nutrients, and it produces a smart oil. So it just needs a lot more research. This is quite a new area, and not a lot has been done yet. The other area that needs a lot of research is the actual turning the algae into the biodiesel fuel itself, or into other types of fuels, like biogas, for example.
So maybe a last question. Are you optimistic about the futures of biofuels, or do you think it's going to be an intermediate solution, or like I said, you said it's not too late, but are you optimistic that it's going to be soon, or do you think it's going to be quite long until it's there on the market?
No, I think like you can already see there are biodiesel,
Yeah.
there are biofuels in the market, and in Brazil, like the bioethanol market is huge. So it's already happening. We just need to keep the development up at the same speed or even faster, and bring in these new types of fuels as we can.
Thank you very much for answering my questions, and I wish you a nice evening.